This is another episode of the Speaking Heat podcast, man. Exciting show, man. I'm really excited about this show. Just from the weekend that we just had, week 13, college football. Major weekend. But I'm excited. Really looking forward to this upcoming weekend and even next weekend because things are really heating up, dude. This is the time of year that rubber meets the road, man. The playoff is starting to shape up, so I'm really excited. This was a really interesting weekend, and going forward, it's gonna be fun. Just couple weeks left. But this past weekend, um, we saw the playoff. We saw the playoffs start taking shape. Really, I feel like the stages of the year kind of start to evolve and develop what the end of the season is going to look like. I feel like that you kind of have sections of the season. I feel like in the beginning of the year, you kind of have like the first couple weeks, 3 or 4 weeks. You get a lot of teams playing your lesser opponents, but I think that's kind of like where we start to form our opinions on what teams might be. I think that the middle part of the season, that middle 4 or 5 games in the middle of the year, I feel like that's where resumes are built. I feel like that's really where teams really kind of place themselves, when it comes to the eyes of the committee, and also when it comes to just the overall narrative of how good teams really are. And then I think the end of the year, for the most part, is kind of like what we're in right now, but it's really the most defining spot you can be in, because this is where really you put yourself in the playoff. These are games you have to win. It's almost like a de facto playoff. Or you've got to win. You've got to win games at the end of the year to put yourself in there, and that's exactly what's happening, man. So I think the last 2 or so weeks, and especially this past weekend and this upcoming weekend's a big one. We're gonna really see the playoff take shape. We know who's in there, who's not in there, and then there's a lot of bubble teams and potential bubble teams. So very much, very much big games this past weekend, this upcoming weekend. Excited, man. This is gonna be fun. When it comes to this past weekend, man, we had a lot of what you would call playoff games. We saw a handful of the teams playing other good teams, and kind of you have to win these games. If you're really trying to stay in the hunt. And we saw a handful of them. We saw really Oregon. We saw Oregon really kind of cement themselves, really, in my opinion, a playoff game. They go and they played SC and had a big win, big dominating win, really. Looked really impressive, played very well. They kind of, what you would say, eliminated SC, and they kind of put themselves right in that playoff mix. We saw Pitt. Pitt with a massive win, man. A massive win on the road, as it may. Pitt, I kind of called this one. I thought Pitt might actually win this game, man. Looking at the game this past week, I was like, Georgia Tech has kind of struggled with some teams, and Pitt's a good football team. I said, don't be surprised if Pitt wins this game, and that's exactly what happened. And they saved their season, and they kind of killed the Georgia Tech season for the most part. We saw Oklahoma. We saw them, and especially their defense, when they played Missouri, man. Their defense is so good. Their defense is so good, man. And just seeing them like dominate the way that they did from start to finish was very impressive. Their offense needs some work, and they need to try to get it together. But their defense looked good, and they had a dominant win, top 25 win, and a crucial win that kind of, I think, potentially put them in the college football playoff. But they still got some more work to do. But a big win for Oklahoma. We saw a crazy game in Utah. Kansas State and Utah had this crazy shootout, and Kansas State was up most of the game, and we saw Utah fight back and ended up winning that game. So a big win for them and keeping their playoff hopes alive. We saw some news over the weekend. Obviously, we saw James Franklin get hired at Virginia Tech. Interesting hire. Very, very good coach. Very, very good coach. So Vatek really got a big one there. So they're going to be putting a lot of resources in that program. So big time win for Virginia Tech there. Um, and really, we'll dive into it a little bit. This past weekend and next weekend, this upcoming Saturday, really Friday and Saturday, it's really a win and you're in scenario for like half of the playoff field. So we'll dive into that a little bit and kind of look at some things when it comes to the playoff because the playoff is right around the corner. And then the ACC championship race. We'll dive in a little bit of that and kind of see, some scenarios in which who can make it to the ACC championship because that race and that conference is absolutely wild. So exciting show, man. I'm really really looking forward to this one. Let's dive in, man. This is gonna be a fun one. We'll dive into Oregon. First up, really the game of the weekend. Really, we saw Oregon and SC really played in a de facto playoff game at this point. I keep saying that, but I mean these games all these games are really playoff games at this point. But we saw Oregon go get a big win against SC. Watching this game was very interesting because I didn't know what to expect from Oregon's offense. In my opinion, Oregon's offense has kind of struggled this year. Defensively, they've really saved Oregon in certain games, and their offense has kind of let them down, especially in that loss against Indiana. So I think Oregon really offensively played well in this game. I like what I saw. I would like to see them continue to get better. But man, Oregon went and really put it to SC, especially in the second half, man. Oregon, really the glaring thing when you watch the game and even at the stat line, the biggest difference is, the run game. Oregon really out-physicaled USC from start to finish for the most part. You could really tell that this Oregon team was the better team up front. Was going to be able to run the football better, and that was really going to be, what controlled the game. And once you kind of figured that Oregon was going to be the better team up front, then you kind of could tell that this game, it was just a matter of time before this game kind of broke open to a degree, and Oregon got a win. But 179 to 52 rushing yards. That was the rushing disparity in this game, and like really looking at the stat line, it felt like they ran for over 200 yards in this game. Oregon's offensive line played very, very well. They're stable of backs. They've got some good running backs. They're deep at running back as well. So they looked really, really good here. Now, going into this game, it was kind of a whoever wins this game is going to probably get in the playoff. SC's kind of in that bubble position, but I think a win from them would have put them in contention to get in as an at-large. But Oregon went and got a big win and really cemented themselves as one of these teams in the playoff. Really, the only thing left is for Oregon, they got to take care of business in a rivalry game against Washington. They do have to travel to Washington. They got to go up to the Pacific Northwest and play, what's really another playoff game because I feel like Oregon has to win this game. If Oregon does not win this game, I feel like they may get knocked out. Of course, especially with the way that some things are shaping out in the middle teens there. But I think Oregon still has to win this game, and obviously, Washington's defense is one of the better defenses in the country, in my opinion. So interesting game. I expect Oregon to win this game, but they need to take care of business. And obviously, if they win this game, they're going to be right in the playoff mix as an at-large. So big win for them. And honestly, if you really look at some more things going on, especially in the Big Ten, if Oregon wins this game, there's still a chance they get in the Big Ten title game. It looks like if Michigan, who plays at home against Ohio State this week, if Michigan beats Ohio State, I think Oregon would get the nod. I think Oregon would get the nod if Ohio State goes down. So interesting scenarios when it comes to conference championships. But they got a big one in Washington this week that they got to go take care of business. And if they do, they're clearly in. So big win this week by Oregon. And they're looking straight at the playoff right now. So big win. Wild game in Atlanta, man. Pitt takes down Georgia Tech. This was a game that I kind of was worried about going through the week. I felt like that Georgia Tech is beatable 100%. And Pitt's a good football team. The last couple of weeks I've been kind of talking about Pitt just from the standpoint of no one's really talking about them, but they're a quality football team. And seeing them go into this game, I just felt like Pitt, there's a good chance Pitt wins this game. And it wasn't close for a lot of the game. Pitt got out to a 28-0 lead. Georgia Tech finally kind of fought themselves back in the game. The momentum started to shift, and Georgia Tech got it back to a 7-point game in the middle of the fourth quarter, and really put the game away. A 56-yard run by Pitt really was the dagger that kind of put this game out of reach and really propelled them to a win. But I feel like this may be looked at as a failed season by Georgia Tech, just because they had a legitimate chance at the playoff. But I don't really look at this as a failure season. Georgia Tech's a good program. They're a building program, and I think that Brent Key's a really good coach, and I think they've got a good future ahead. I think this helps cement their brand as a respectable brand again. But on the other side, Pitt. This win really kept their season alive because this win still gives them a chance to get into the ACC championship, and that's going to be their path to the playoff. They're not ranked high enough to get an at-large bid, so they're going to have to go and really some things are going to have to shake up and happen this upcoming week. But Pitt's they're in position. They've done what they need to do to get into the ACC title game to potentially make a playoff run. But big win for Pitt, man. It was very, very impressive watching the game. Georgia Tech kind of mistake prone. The momentum really was in Pitt's favor most of the game. Second half, Georgia Tech was storming back, but Pitt really played well. Pitt, in a way, almost kind of put themselves in a bad spot to give the game away. I think in the fourth quarter, with about 7 minutes left, they went and faked a punt up 14 and gave it right back to Georgia Tech in plus territory. So almost gave Georgia Tech a chance to get back in the game, really. But they got the win done. Really looking forward now. This upcoming week, they get another big one. Pitt's got a major game. They have to win this game. I think this is a must-win for both of these teams. Pitt hosts Miami. I think this is a massive game because Miami's right there in that playoff hunt. They're right there on the bubble. So Miami's got to win. And this will be an impressive win if they do win this game. Miami's got to win to get in to the playoff as an at-large. And on the other side, Pitt's got to win this game because they need to stay in contention for the ACC championship with according to what's going on with some other teams. But Pitt hosted Miami is a massive game this week. This is, one of the more crucial games when it comes to the playoff because this is really going to determine kind of who gets in or who gets in the conference championships that's going to propel a team to the college football playoff. But major game this weekend with Pitt and Georgia Tech. Big win and big game for them this weekend. And really, they're really looking at the ACC championship right now. And really, we'll take a look here at the scenarios in which teams can actually get to the ACC championship and get to the playoff. As we see here, we've got right now, I think the chances of making the ACC championship game here, we've got Virginia at essentially 80%. SMU essentially at 70%, and then Pitt's right there at 22%. So basically, I think the scenario right now with who would get in, I think if Virginia and SMU, whoever wins those games, I think Virginia plays Virginia Tech, and I can't remember who SMU's plays. But if Virginia wins and SMU win, the winners of those respective games get in the ACC championship. If Virginia wins and SMU, If Virginia wins their game this weekend against Virginia Tech, they're going to go to the ACC championship. If SMU wins their game this weekend, they go to the ACC championship, regardless of what happens down here. Now, if Virginia and SMU, if one of those teams loses, I think Pitt has to win this week against Miami. If they win this week against Miami, I think Pitt would go into a spot if SMU would lose. So that's why it's crucial for Pitt to win this weekend against Miami. Because Miami doesn't really have a shot. They've got less than 0.5%. They don't really have a shot to get to the ACC championship. But we're seeing Pitt putting themselves in position to get in there. But some things have to go their way. I think it's probably going to be Virginia and SMU in the ACC championship in that game. Interesting matchup there. I think I would have Virginia probably winning that matchup. But, you never know because, I mean, these teams are very similar. So, there's no telling what really happens, in the ACC championship. But just interesting to see how, this would unfold because certain teams have to win, certain teams have to lose for certain teams to get in. So there's a lot here to unpack when it comes to this upcoming weekend. And that's why this upcoming weekend is massive because we're going to be seeing all types of teams in contention spots for these conference championship spots that are playoff spots. So, big in the ACC here, man. It's massive, massive games, because these are games that's really going to determine the ACC and determine the playoffs. So, interesting to see that race happen, man. I'm going to be glued to what happens this weekend, but massive implications this weekend. Another game that we saw this weekend that was really impressive for the game itself was Oklahoma, man. Oklahoma's defense is really good. And we've known this throughout the season. They've had, great performances all year. But just to see them go out and control Missouri, we're talking Missouri, I think, had 6 total points, but it was on 2 field goals. So they never even touched the end zone. So they denied Missouri's offense, who Missouri actually had their quarterback, Bo Pribula, back after an injury earlier in the year. So Missouri was kind of somewhat at full strength and never touched the end zone. So that's very, very impressive for an Oklahoma defense like that. So I'm very, very impressed with Oklahoma's defense. They're going to be a hard out when it comes to the playoff. But their offense continued to struggle this weekend. Missouri's got a pretty decent defense. Their defense is pretty respectable. But at the same time, I'd still look at it like they should have done better than 17 points. Ever since John Mateer has come back for this team, he's not been the same. They've not been the same on offense. It wasn't the greatest showing. They had 276 total yards and only 173 yards passing. So not a great showing. This is a concern for me because I see this team as a legitimate playoff team, but at the same time, I really don't know how they're going to win games in the playoff. You're going to be playing against the best teams in the country, the best quarterbacks and the best, offenses in general. And so to see this team play this way, especially on offense, is going to be very, very worrisome because I feel like, there's a chance they may not score 20. So this puts a lot of pressure on their defense. So, impressive win here, but at the same time, I feel like in a playoff game situation, I think they could struggle to win a game because their offense just doesn't put up a lot of points. Looking forward for Oklahoma this upcoming weekend, they've got another one, another tough game. This is not going to be an easy game at all. They are at home, but they do play LSU. So, this is another de facto playoff game. Just from the standpoint of, they have to win to get in my opinion. I think if Oklahoma loses to LSU, they may drop out of the top 11 or 12. So this is crucial that they go and take care of business and win this game and put themselves in the playoff here. So massive, massive implications this upcoming weekend for Oklahoma. They've got to get it done to get in this playoff. And lastly, a game that was pretty wild. This is a game that I watched kind of part of the third quarter, and then I kind of really was paying attention to it in the fourth quarter. But Utah taking down Kansas State at home was a wild game. 51-47, wild game. Kansas State was up, basically at least a possession and more, basically most of the second half. And they led the entire game until about 50, I think it was 55 or so seconds left in the fourth quarter. Um, Utah had a major run on their last drive of the game. They put them down in the red zone and they ended up scoring, and that's really what put them up 51-47. But just insane ending to that game. Kyle Whittingham looks like he's probably going to end up retiring, or at least not coaching Utah after the season. So this is big for them because this keeps Utah's playoff chances alive. You know, they're right there at the bubble. They're the 12th ranked team, or 12th or 13th ranked team in the country. So they're going to be right in that mix on who gets in as long as they win out if chaos happens, you know, especially in that high double digits. So major that they won that game because this keeps their playoff hopes, you know, securely alive. Massive game, massive performance, just wild game, but big for Utah. But that's big, you know, another big one for the playoff because this puts another team right in the mix, and keeps them right in there to maybe get in as an at-large. But major win for Utah there. Next, some big news, you know, over the weekend, man. James Franklin, you know, former Penn State head coach James Franklin that was fired earlier this year, man, has got a new job. Virginia Tech and James Franklin came to a deal. It looks like it's about a $42 million deal through 2030. Big, you know, big time for James Franklin, man. Very good coach. Very good coach. And, you know, he gets a big deal. Big deal with Virginia Tech through 2030. But really, like, him getting hired, the first thing I'm hearing is they're going to start putting money into this program. So when I hear that, that's big. That's big time. That's big time for this Virginia Tech team because that's really what all college football is about now. You know, is the resources that you have, the money that you put into the program. You know, with NIL and recruiting, and facilities, because that all is what it takes to win. And it looks like they're going to start investing in this program with James Franklin there. So very impressive, man. Very impressive to see him get a job this quick. I like the hire for VTech. I think that there's not really a better coach out there to a degree that's available, especially right now that's available. But, you know, he's one of the best, and he proved it at Penn State, and hopefully, at least in the hopes of Virginia Techians, man, James Franklin is going to bring that level of success to VTech, man. And really looking at the ACC and the landscape there, you know, that's kind of may be the weakest conference in the country. So I think that's big for them because I think that gives them a real chance to go and compete at the top of that conference. And, you know, as we know, it's all about the playoff. So if you're able to get in that conference championship and win it, man, you know, that puts you right in the forefront of the playoff. So, you know, massive news for James Franklin. I'm excited to see what he does there, man. Because you can win there. Virginia Tech, you know, they've got players in that area, in that DMV area. So interesting for VTech, and big hiring news in the coaching world of college football, man. Right now, we're really gonna dive into Week 14, and this is really, you know, why I'm kind of excited about this show, because Week 14 is gonna be massive. It's massive. Like, the games that we have on the slate that are either conference championship contention or contention with the playoff, and games that affect the playoff, there's tons. There's a ton of games, man. Like, we'll dive in. We'll dive in here to a handful of games here. Really, the first one, you know, I mean, I don't even know really the order to go in, but just some games that kind of affect. I would say some first category here we're going to really look at, in my opinion, are playoff at-large must-wins. And, you know, basically that's just going to be, there's teams in these games that I feel like, in my opinion, they must win to either keep themselves in the playoff hunt or to keep themselves within the playoff standings as we sit now. First off, Bama at Auburn. Big one. I think could potentially be a nail-biting game, man. Auburn's defense is really good. They just started their talented freshman quarterback who actually played very well this past week. Their offense really was electric and really went and played really well. To be fair, against a lesser opponent, but still, freshman quarterback gets in there and plays well. It's going to build confidence for a massive game against Alabama. Alabama and Auburn. Really, the way that this affects the playoff really is Alabama's got to win. They have to win. I don't think they can afford a loss here. Alabama's got to go take care of business. If they lose, they're out of the playoff. Clear cut. They're not ranked high enough to afford a loss, and they've already got the loss on the year. And I think that's kind of an anchor that's kind of been holding them down a little bit. But yeah, I think that's a massive, massive spot to be in. They're right there, right above the bubble. They need to go take care of business and win that game. So massive game for Alabama there. I feel like they go and win that game, but they it's a must win. It's a must win for the Tide. Another one that's interesting, Ohio State at Michigan. Obviously, this is the game. Ohio State, for them, obviously the last, 3 seasons, 3 or 4 years, they've lost to Michigan. And that's been embarrassing, as an Ohio State fan and as a player and a team and a coach and everything. You don't want to lose to Michigan. That's like the biggest thing here. You don't want to lose to Michigan. They're at Michigan. I hear it's supposed to be cold. There's supposed to be snow. So that obviously leans in Michigan's favor. But the reason I kind of have this game where it's at, man, I looked at the Big Ten, and Michigan is right behind Indiana and Ohio State. They're third right now. They're ranked third in the Big Ten standings. So this is kind of a must-win for Michigan in a way. Michigan, there is a path for Michigan to get in the Big Ten title game. I think it's something like Ohio State or Indiana or Michigan has to win this week against Ohio State. And then I want to say Indiana has to take a loss or Oregon has to take a loss. If one of those teams lose and Michigan wins, I think Michigan would get in the Big Ten championship game. And that's big for them because, they're kind of a little far back in the at-large spot. But at the same time, if they get in that Big Ten title game, it really doesn't matter because if they get in there and win it, then they're in. Now, I think something that's very interesting here is that if Michigan beats Ohio State, do they move up into potentially an at-large? Because I kind of look at their resume, and if you kind of don't put the Michigan label on it, if you just look at it like if a team that's 10-2 beats the number 1 ranked team in the country the week before, in the last week of the season, do they not get in? I mean, really, Michigan's 9-2 as we speak. And if they go and win it against Ohio State, they're going to beat the number 1 ranked team in the country who's undefeated. And 10-2 beat the number 1 team in the country. I could seriously see an argument for Michigan to actually sneak in the playoff as an at-large here. I don't think they need I don't think that they really need the conference championship to get in. I think there's a chance that Michigan still has an opportunity to get in, especially with this past week with Georgia Tech losing. We're going to see Michigan go up 1 or 2 spots. So we're going to see them bump up to potentially be in that spot there. Oregon, just like we talked about earlier, Oregon's got to win. This is a massive game. This is a must-win for them. I think if Oregon loses, I think they potentially bump out of the playoff. I don't think they can afford the loss here. They've got to go take care of business. It's like we were talking about earlier. Utah at Kansas, not the greatest game on paper, but again, another must-win. Utah's got to win. If they want to keep themselves in the playoff hunt as an at-large, they've got to win this game against Kansas. They've got to go and win, and potentially, I think there's a chance that Utah may keep the foot on the gas, even if this game gets out of hand. Put the foot on the gas and go put up some style points to impress the committee to maybe bump them a spot or two to kind of see if they can get within that top 12 or 11 and get in the playoff there. Um, Vandy at Tennessee. The reason that I say this is a must win for them, and this does affect the playoff in my opinion, I think with Georgia Tech losing and Tennessee going and beating Florida handedly, Tennessee's going to come up a little bit in the rankings. I think Vandy is close enough to an at-large bid spot that I think if they beat Tennessee on the road, I think that's enough to impress the committee to bump them up potentially up in the, that 12-11 spot potentially. I think them beating Tennessee would be very, very impressive. So I mean that really affects that's a must win for Vandy. We'll take a look here at the ACC. I think these are must wins in the ACC, like we were talking about earlier. Virginia and Virginia Tech. I think Virginia obviously they need to win. They need to win this game to get to and get in the ACC championship because that's going to be their path to the playoff. Same for SMU. SMU needs to win this week and get in the ACC championship. These teams cannot afford losses. And then Pitt. I think Pitt also needs to win to get into the ACC championship. Now, there's some more things that need to happen. Obviously Virginia, SMU, some of those teams need to lose. But Pitt, they've got to win this week to really, have that route to the ACC championship to get to the playoff. So, I mean, those are some another, big must wins this week. And then really, so, a couple more games that aren't necessarily must wins, but in a way, to a degree, but massive games in general. I think really the biggest game of the weekend, Texas A&M goes to Texas. Massive game, massive game, old school SWAC rivalry game. I think Texas is going to, try to come out and really not even spoil Texas A&M season, but it would at least, put a little bit of sting at the end of the year. But I think this is a massive game. I think Texas A&M, they can afford the loss. I would not be surprised if in the event that this game starts turning Texas's way late, maybe that Texas A&M pulls some starters. Maybe let's just say, I think there's a potential chance that you could see Texas A&M in this game rotate starters, rotate some backups in, keep their starters fresh because they could afford a loss. They don't have to win this game to even get to the SEC championship. They could lose this game and still get to the SEC championship, and that puts them right in, a top 4 spot, if they win the SEC championship. So I could easily see, Texas is winning this game just because of things like that. But massive game nonetheless. And then another big one, this is going to be a fun game. This is going to be Friday night. Actually, both of these games are Friday night. Georgia plays Georgia Tech in Atlanta at Mercedes-Benz. To start the year, this was a game that, I haven't went to any games this year, but I was thinking about, maybe purchasing some tickets to some games. And this is like the number one on my list because I figured that this game was going to be like a big game. And it's not as big as it was. But at the same time, it's still a big game because Georgia's very, very good. Georgia looks like one of the better teams in the country. And Georgia Tech is a good football team. And I think this game potentially is going to be close. I think it's going to be competitive. It may not go into overtime like it did last year, but I think this is going to be a good football game, exciting, entertaining, rivalry game. This is rivalry week, which it's not as much rivalry week as it used to be because of the way the conference realignment has happened and everything. But it's rivalry week nonetheless. And Georgia Tech are going to go out there and try to ball. I do think that Georgia might be able to afford a loss here. But I do think Georgia Tech is going to want to go in there. And if they can knock Georgia out of the playoffs somehow, some way, they're going to try. So I think we might see Georgia Tech's best punch of the season here against Georgia. Especially they're going to want to try to avenge that overtime loss last year. But massive weekend, man. This weekend, there's so many games that mean so much to what the playoff is going to end up being. I'm very excited about this weekend. On paper, these aren't the best games of the season. But I think the slate as a whole and what this slate means and what these games mean, This is the biggest weekend of the season by far. Exciting, man. Exciting. Obviously, Thanksgiving's this Thursday, so gonna be a fun week. We got tons of college football this weekend. NFL football this weekend. We got some NFL football on Thanksgiving. Looking forward to this week. This is gonna be a good week. Um, Happy holidays, happy Thanksgiving, everybody out there, man. Exciting weekend. Enjoy the turkey. Enjoy the bird, man. So I guess I'm gonna get out of here, man. Exciting weekend. Looking forward to this weekend, and we'll be on here next week. And next week's show is gonna be another big one, because it's gonna be all about conference championships after this week. You know, Excited to dive in to really see what the playoff is gonna be, because the playoff is in 2 weeks. So next week's show is gonna be big, and we might do a live. We might actually go live on Speaking Heat, on live on YouTube for the playoff reveal, actually. So we might have a playoff reveal reaction show on December 7th. So excited to dive into the next week or two, because massive games and exciting football, man. We'll get out of here. Speaking some heat.